Good evening and welcome to the panel discussion on women's empowerment. What a fantastic setting we have for this evening. As the last golden hues of the setting sun leave the facade of the Angel of Victory atop this fabulous monument, and as the winter night creeps in to this city, we have four distinguished panelists who are going to talk to us about women's empowerment. Even more, they're going to tell us whether they believe that women are an impediment or an obstacle themselves to their own empowerment. Remember, we are seated in what must be the biggest monument to a woman in this city. And just like this monument, which was meant to be built in the capital city of British India to commemorate the reign of a lady, had its construction delayed to the extent that when it actually was completed, this no longer remained the capital. So the first question, I think, to ponder about women's empowerment is this a subject that is topical at all today? Or is it something that is taken for granted, debated, time-tested, and well-established? And I'm going to tell you, as a man of biology, that I think there is no longer any debate about women versus men, their male counterparts. And any debate in terms of power was put to rest about 8 years ago when the Human Genome Project was finished in the United States. Because you will know that the only difference between the male and its female counterpart is one chromosome. Whereas the ladies are gifted with two X chromosomes, the man has one X and one Y. If I now tell you that the difference between the male and the female is between the X and the Y chromosome, and then I go on to tell you that the Human Genome Project has established once for all and without doubt that the Y chromosome has 78 genes. The Y chromosome, which we men have 78 genes. The female counterpart, the Y chromosome, of the Y chromosome is the X chromosome. And the X chromosome has 1,000 genes. So I think the business of males being superior to the females of the species has been put to biological rest ever since the Human Genome Project. 1,000 versus 78, can you believe it? So on that note, I'm going to ask the panelists, and I'm going to start off with Shati, to tell us whether she thinks first that this whole business of women's empowerment is now outdated. And then we'll come back to you about the obstacle bit.
Yeah, I wish Donald Trump was here and he had heard just what you said about women being more powerful. Right now, today, on 21st, women are marching in 61 countries of the world against the kind of challenge that they can see with the ascendance of Donald Trump on US presidency. In this city, we are having two events. One, thankfully here in Victoria on women empowerment. The second one is happening in Allen Park, where women are saying, we claim the space. It is thought that the public space is not really for the woman. She quickly finishes her business and goes away. Who hang out in parks, in bus stops, in malls? It's the men. And if a woman is ever abused, she was asked, what is it that you were doing there? So women today are meeting in Allen Park in Kolkata just to say that we have as much right to be in a park after sundown having a good time as men. Until such time as women have to do these very basic things, say that we have equal right to property, to public space, to education, to health. Women's empowerment is a live subject. I wish it were dead. It's not.
Seema, your opinion on that? Do you think women's empowerment is something that we should really need to talk about? It's not like as established as the sun rising in the east?
I think women empowerment has been there all along. And as far as I'm concerned, a woman is empowered as long as she gets to do what she wishes to do. Empowerment of a woman for me is, I wish to stay at home. I wish to tend to my children at home. I wish to go out work. It is my decision as to what I wish to do. And as far as these mental fetters are concerned, which prevent us from doing what we wish to do, is probably because it's been passed on from one generation to another. But otherwise, I think we are very, very empowered. It all depends on the kind of people who you live with and the kind of training you've got. It's the tradition at home.
Okay. We'll have to ask Ashok, who has the distinction of being the only male member of this panel, his opinion on this. Before you answer, is your wife in the audience?
No, she isn't, but I still possess the weaker chromosome. So I would like to say, as Shondeep did, and echo the words of Judith Butler, who is now regarded as the leading feminist in the world, that gender is actually a matter of creation. Gender doesn't exist. So for that point of view, I agree with Shondeep. But I would say that it's not so simple to answer the question whether, in fact, a question of women's empowerment is relevant today or not, or whether it is out of date. Because on the one level, it seems axiomatic, it seems something that has been done to death, but on the other, in a rapidly postmodern, post-colonial society, cultural issues often cloud your judgment. And so patriarchy is not just a question of a male stranglehold, it's a point of view. Let's take, for example, the Jallikattu debate. Now, on the surface of it, it seems to be a barbaric kind of a cultural ritual. But you have thousands and thousands of people who are agitating for it. So culturally, someone may think that a woman at home is a better thing. So in order to combat that, it becomes a complex issue which we need to take up. And in that sense, it is very relevant.
Anuradhadi?
Till the last woman on earth is empowered, this debate must go on. Women in this society, in an educated society, are privileged. They can choose to be empowered or not. There's a huge number of women world over who have neither education nor money, or one or the other, and that is the reason they cannot be empowered. Before money, I think it's education. Those women deprived of education are the ones with the least chance of being empowered. Those women who have education have a longer battle to fight, a harder battle to fight. Those without education and with money also have a very big battle to fight, but sometimes easier, because money just makes things go round. So I think this debate should be raised every single day till we as a community, we as a society, and I mean the world over, Donald Trump well said, must realize. And I want to contradict you about the weak chromosome and it's not the weaker chromosome. Chromosomes are not weak I'm glad I'm a biologist and I can fight with my good friend. Number of genes on a chromosome does not make a chromosome weaker. Clearly he forgot his biology when he became a doctor. I'm paying you back. I don't think the Y chromosome genes have anything to do with empowerment or not. Empowerment is a social issue. And most of the genes on the Y chromosome are just negative genes which suppress genetic function of the female body. So that's all right. But Again, I agree, Ashok, gender and, he was trying to mislead us. So we must be empowered to know that as a doctor, he's brilliant, but as a biologist, he forgot. Now, but yes, I'm very sincere about one thing. Can I say 2 minutes something?
Please feel free.
I want to scold all those women who have education and money and choose not to be empowered. Not allowed. Don't be lazy. Don't hide behind my husband won't let me do this. My father didn't allow. Rubbish. Shame on you for getting educated, not using your education, for being affluent, having access to meals, a roof, transport, everything, and still not following your heart where you should be doing it. Yes, I agree, it could be your decision, as Seema said, to go out into the world or not. But don't say you're not empowered. I am here today as a proponent of those rural women in India or anywhere in Africa who have neither education nor money. These are the ones who need empowerment, where they can't fight for their empowerment. They don't know how to. Their society, men, others could oppress them. But those who have education have no excuse.
Thank you, Anuradha. I have to bow down to her much superior molecular biology knowledge. But I'll just tell you that those genes that she says are suppressor genes, suppressed genes in the Y chromosome have been called silent genes. And every husband in this audience will understand why they're called that. So I think Calcutta Debating Circle will breathe a sigh of relief that all our panelists feel that this is still a very topical issue. So I'm now going to go into the second point that Anuradha Lohia just raised, and that is that women often seek subterfuge, saying, my father will not allow it, my husband will not allow it, and use it as an excuse to actually be empowered themselves, which is actually what the motion today is about, that women themselves are an obstacle to their own empowerment. And I'm going to start off with Seema Sapru. Seema, do you agree with that in many ways women themselves, rather than the men, are an obstacle to women's empowerment?
I wouldn't say they do it intentionally. I think that's how they've been brought up, with those values, with those traditions. I would just like to tell you that this is about, say, 2 weeks ago. A teacher wanted to resign from the services of the school. And the reason was that she was getting married and she was very unhappy, extremely unhappy.
Unhappy about getting married or leaving the school?
Unhappy about getting married. And she was getting married to a childhood sweetheart. And she was doing her PhD. She wanted to continue her studies. She said she had never been taught to look after a family. She was the only child of her parents, who studied very well, who finished her studies, who excelled everywhere. But she had no idea and she was in no mood to get married. But her parents refused to listen to her, and she did have to give in to their demands. So which I feel she was doing a PhD in physics, she had excelled everywhere, and yet she wasn't empowered. She was just not empowered to do anything that she wanted to. The parents didn't teach her to take independent decisions. So what kind of education is that? Where she said she only studied, wrote examinations and excelled. That's about it. That was her life.
Shati, do you agree that women are an obstacle to their own empowerment?
Actually, yes. There are ways in which it seems from the outside that certain decisions and certain actions that women take are going against their own interest. Let us for one moment take off from what Dr. Lohia was saying, that education. Women have educated women, what are they doing sitting at home? Why are they giving excuses? And then I'm thinking of Meeta Mondol, this woman who was a postgraduate from Jadavpur University, and within 3 months of her wedding, she was dead. She was killed off. So the question actually I was asking myself, that why is education, even postgraduate education, or even a job? As a journalist, I have even covered a police constable who was killed off for dowry, and nothing could be done. The family did not even register a case. It was written off as suicide. Most are written off as accidents. Kiran Bedi often talked about how MBA women would come to her and grovel and ask for relief from abuse. So the real question is that what is it in education, in job, that still don't empower women? This woman, this lady who is against her will, having had to leave a job in a school. And my question is that we need to go beyond biology. We have to look at the economics. A woman can perhaps decide for herself when she has some asset in her name, some place where she can go. Women put up indefinitely with abuse, and she won't even tell others. She won't show it on her face.
Yeah.
She feels that she has to hide.
Would you
To
agree
answer
with-
both of you, I think what they lack is confidence. Why do they lack confidence? They don't have the guts to take a risk, because either they don't have money to fall back on and maybe think that their parents will not support them, or they just have been very comfortable in a sheltered existence, and it's very hard to take that first step. But again, the onus comes back to the woman, because she can't, there's no reason for her to be unhappy. So she is not being very sincere or honest here. It's easy again to hide by saying, I have to do what my parents are telling me to do. You didn't listen to your parents when you wanted to do a PhD? Or was it that a showcase for them that my daughter is doing a PhD? You have to take your chances, your decisions. Why are they not empowered to do this? We don't teach them this in school. You can't teach them this in school or in college. This is something which is a hunger which grows from within. You have to be hungry to be free. You have to be hungry to decide your own fate. Even one slim notion that I'll follow what my family, my husband, my father, my whoever says, that's anathema. You're finished.
Ashok?
I'm
Last
afraid-
word on whether women are an obstacle to their
Yes,
own
I have to also leave because I'm in a big rush. But I'll just start off by saying that what Dr. Lohia said seems to be most relevant here. We must look at the rural sector that forms a major part of the Indian populace. So education, therefore, does not become a factor there, because most of these women are not educated because they have not been allowed to be educated. Here, a deep-rooted patriarchy that exists not just in our country, but it has been existing through the ages. How do you explain the fact that so many women scientists, and I say scientists because Dr. Lohia and Dr. Chatterjee and others are here, who had as far-reaching discoveries as Leonardo da Vinci during the Renaissance, have not been mentioned in either the pages of Google or any kind of history. So there's been a deep-rooted patriarchy, and yet a lower middle-class woman called Jeanne d'Arc came out. And even while threatened by the Koch, she kept her own and would rather be burnt at the stake than go away. Or if you look at the famous Boston, Massachusetts witch hunt of 1692, there too the women refused to say that they were sorry. So there have been exceptions. The only way we can combat this is, one, that women themselves must get rid of this mindset that they have. The patriarchy is not necessarily by the men, for the men, and of the men. Patriarchy is a concept which has consumed all of us, culturally, economically, politically, and we act according to that. And that is what needs to be cut. And I'll end my speech with a small story, if I may, since we are in the precincts of the hallowed Victoria Memorial. And my subject, though not biology, was mathematics. And I must tell you that the Reverend Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, better known as Lewis Carroll, wrote a book called Alice in Wonderland, which was presented to Queen Victoria. And I mentioned this story to show the ambivalence, the complexity of the female psyche. And she loved that book, Alice in Wonderland. And she liked the companion volume Through the Looking Glass too. And she expressly said that I want this author's next book. Now, the Reverend Charles Lutwidge Dodgson was actually a master at Oxford University of mathematics. And his next book was called Mathematica Curiosa, which was duly presented to Queen Victoria, who, as we know, was not amused. Thank you.
It's interesting you talk about Alice in Wonderland, because almost all the characters in Alice in Wonderland were female, and the only big character who was male was called the Mad Hatter. Ashok mentioned something about how we have a stereotyped patriarchy, and how that's really the problem that a lot of women face. And I'd like to draw your attention, if you turn your gaze to your left and look at the poster there on the right, or my right, your left, you will see that a theme of women's empowerment has a women's sign supported by 3 males below it. You know, I think that represents the very paradox of what we're talking about. Because even in women's empowerment, whoever has chosen that, it wasn't me, whoever has chosen that symbol has 3 men propping up the female sign, as you will see. Don't you think that's a commentary on our patriarchal mindset?
I thought it's that the work of one man, if has to be done by 3 men, 3 men are trying to struggle to do just one man, what one woman can do. As to the patriarchy and the stereotype of patriarchy, unfortunately, many things which are stereotyped are still true. So I would like to contradict, just for this is a debate, we are after all in a debating circle, that, you know, maybe not all of this, not all the disempowerment that we see around us is the lack of attitude, the lack of hunger in women. It does have very deep, practical, economic roots. One study, let me just quote one study, which shows that 49% of all women in Kerala, as you know, is very highly educated. Even in that state, 49% of all women face some kind of physical domestic abuse. This is not just even emotional abuse, kicks and slaps and such things. These 49% are women who have neither land nor a house in their name. When a woman has either a land or a house in her own name, it goes down to 19%. If she has both a piece of land and a place to stay in her own name, goes down to 8%. This shows that the individual's choice is decided by very practical, very financial matters. It is the structural thing. Patriarchy is a structural thing. We should not make the mistake of thinking that it is our emotions and our beliefs. It's much more serious than that. And we have to take opportunity of occasions like this to strike where it hurts. If women are to be empowered, they are to be given land rights.
As the head of an educational institution in this city, have you done anything, or do you do anything particularly specially proactive for the ladies in your institution?
Well, yes. We have these workshops, sessions for our parents and for our teachers and for our students. We talk about gender sensitivity. And we make sure, since, this is a co-ed school and Calcutta is a very traditional old school place where you either have all boys schools or all girls schools. So there are very few co-ed schools. So ours is one. So we do have this, like India has 940 to 1000, the skewed ratio that we have. In our school also the ratio is a bit skewed, and I would say it should be about 65 to 35, boys versus girls. So yes, there are certain things where we realize that boys, particularly in a co-ed school, they get more opportunity than the girls. So what we've done is, in the last 10 years, we realized we had our children only one school captain, only one games captain, and it was only the boy who was doing it. So now today, we've started one male school captain, one female school captain, one male games captain, one female games captain, one grievance committee president who is a male, another one female. So we've done that. Plus, as I said, there are girls who are given a lot of responsibilities, as much, if not as much, in fact, a little more than the boys are given. So we're doing our bit, I think.
I'm going to invite the student panelists up here in front, please. And can we have Ali Dastarji, Dharna Lakmani, Molly Fierro, Naman Gupta, and Hannah Amer to please come up and take the seats to our left. And these young men and women come from various universities across the world: Harvard, Emory, Cambridge, London School of Economics. Do you think, as the head of a major university today, you could do something in that capacity to help the ladies in your university?
It's a celebration of our university that today I don't need to do anything special for the female students of presidency. What we have is a committee against sexual harassment where both men and women come. It's not just against women.
And how many complaints against sexual harassment do you get
many.
from the other side?
It's
Equal?
Not necessarily equal, but we don't have too many. It's a very free campus, and it's a very vocal campus, as you all know. It's an empowered campus. It's an empowered campus not because of me, but because of the nature of the institution. The first female student came much later than when the institution was formed 200 years ago. But ever since then, and I was a student in 1972, where the ratio of women to men as students was, women were much less than men. Today I'm very proud to tell you that 52% of our students are women. So we are more women than men. It's a very vocal campus. It's a very empowered campus. We're going to have student union elections. We probably have more student leaders, women leaders than men, or maybe equal. So I don't need to do anything extra.
So
but we have all
you're saying that women's empowerment is unnecessary. Women in presidency
No, I'm not saying
university
that.
are already
I am
empowered.
saying educated women will be easily empowered. And I agree with my colleague here that land, money, economic issues are extremely important for empowerment. But when you don't have money, there's the one tool which is very strong which can empower you, and that is education. It will lead you towards money. But without education, having the money also doesn't help because you'll get cheated out of it. The confidence level comes only with education.
I'm going to put on my medical hat again for a few seconds. I tell you, we've been talking about the power of the woman. Perhaps we should digress a little bit and also talk about the power of the unborn women. And remind ourselves that in this country, 10 million girl children have been killed in the last 20 years. 10 million, that's the statistics. So I think, would you not agree that if you're going to really have to talk about women's empowerment, it must begin in the womb? And it has to begin with the woman who is bearing the child in her womb itself. Would you agree with that, Anuradha?
Absolutely. I think the decision to have a child should be the woman's. The decision to, there should be no female infanticide. It's criminal. It can't help. So the womb, the power begins there, and this is where America is really still way behind. That, okay, here there is other kinds of subterfuge and women are harassed, but imagine their legislation doesn't allow it for the woman to decide. This is not on.
Yeah, Shati. You do agree that this, the most fundamental biological empowerment of a woman is that she is chosen to bear the future of the species. And how can you defend? How can you say that we do not need women's empowerment in a country where we kill 10 million of our girl children unborn?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's actually a genocide. And probably in the history of the humankind, there has never been such a phenomenon where parents have been doing away with their unborn children for the simple fact that they belong to the wrong gender. The tragedy of this, the horror of this, I don't think will be realized in our generation, will probably realized in the generations after this. But it raises many uncomfortable questions for us, because once again, this link between education and empowerment. It is a very sad truth that more female feticides happen in the urban areas, in well-educated, rich families. So why is it that women who themselves seem to have education, seem to have at least conventional education, who seem to have more say on their own lives, still choose not to have a daughter? Even if they have one, the second one they will never have, the third one almost never. There is a very clear decline in the sex ratio of the second child. So once again, there is a very direct connection between feticide and dowry. So the empowerment quotient goes directly down with what you have to spend on your girl child.
Seema, do you agree with this chemistry between education and empowerment? In other words, even the ones that are educated are not necessarily empowered in the sense that they still have a bias towards their own female children?
See, it's all very nice here. The women who are sitting here in this Victoria Memorial, all of us are debating and listening to this debate. It's all very easy for us to say that the women have to be empowered. But it's not easy. There are women who are educated, who get into a relationship maybe with men from affluent background, get married, and yet they have absolutely no say. As far as women, you see, I'm saying that because I am an empowered woman, I could do what I felt like doing, and I still can do whatever I feel like doing. But then there are women who cannot, they haven't been trained to do that. As I said about mental fetters, there are things that women from one generation to the other keep passing on the stories, that this is what has happened. And you're not supposed to be doing this. You are supposed to be taking care of, listening to your husband or your in-laws or everybody in the family. Whatever they say should be the final word. So if they've been trained like that from good, well-educated family backgrounds, what do you do about that? They've never been empowered.
Right. On that note, I'm going to pause a little bit for the panelists and allow our students to ask any question on the discussion so far on women's empowerment to any of the panelists. At the moment, we have been deserted by our only male panelist, so you'll have to ask one of these ladies. I don't know whether that's a sign of the topic that we're debating, that he's had to leave in a hurry.
My name is Molly Furo. I'm a third-year student at Emory University, which is in Atlanta, Georgia. And over the next year, I'm going to be writing a thesis on women in South Asia. So I'm really happy to be here. So my interest in this topic comes from the phrasing, women are an obstacle to their empowerment, which relies on the notion that women are a category and that we can describe women as a singular group. And I think that the place where women break down in terms of empowerment is when you look at those intersections and the way that in the United States, 54% of white women, women who look like me and are from my town, voted for Donald Trump. And there's a breakdown, I think, in those conversations. And I think part of it has to do with the way that a lot of responsibility falls on women. They don't want to be the ones to bring up gender as an obstacle because it's stigmatized. But I also think that it has to do with narratives. So the way that we describe women of the so-called global south as virtuous and vulnerable, that there's particular tropes that they fall into. So I'm wondering what you think are the most important ways that women can work to cross these transnational boundaries and have more informed conversations about feminisms rather than feminism.
How do you think women can do this, Anuradha?
So this is where I'll take your example. So 54% of white women from your town. So I'm presuming they all had access to primary education and higher education, and maybe most of them went to college. So my point has been taken care of. They have received all the information and education that they could. Why do they still do what they do? This is where education cannot just be a degree. And education must allow this woman to think through her own image, which is where women become an obstacle to their own empowerment when they don't think that their image should be one where they have the right to choose, where they have the right to decide for themselves, and why they would fall for other people's notions, accept something blindly. There is a fault then not only in the educational method, but also in the social milieu, which tells the women very subconsciously, obey, follow. That's the problem. Just 1 second. I think in India the problem is we are too multicultural, too multi-layered. The social complexities are much more, which is why I could divide society in the privileged and the underprivileged sections. But you came up with a very good example where everybody came from the same privileges. So I think it's about looking at yourself. And again, I would ascribe it to a certain laziness in not stepping out of your comfort zone.
Go ahead.
I'm Hannah Amer. I'm a graduate from London School of Economics, and I'm also Egyptian. And I want to say that we have a saying in Egypt that women usually tell their daughters, and that's the shadow of the man is more bearable than the shadow of a wall. And mothers usually say this to their children, to their daughters, when a man comes along when they're over the age of 30, so no longer desirable as women. With the revolution, I see that there are so many questionable or doubtable successes, but the main undoubtable and unquestionable success of the Arab Spring is the empowerment of women in Egypt. And we have so many new examples of women coming out and speaking out about gender inequality. And one of the most recent cases of a woman called Hadir, who gave birth to a child, and the father disowned the child. He told her, "I'm not married to you." And this woman decided to keep the child, and she decided to go on social media and tell the world, "I need my rights in my countries as a woman." And there's now like social uproar in Egypt about that. And the uproar now, the problem is women are telling her, "You shouldn't have had that child." And this is where I ask, how do we unlearn the lessons of gender that we have already internalized? And I'm mainly talking about the older generation here. How do mothers then bring up their children to teach them that empowerment is a legacy? And I know it takes one step at a time to get there, but where do we start and how do we start? Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. I think it would not be out of place to remind you that the Valley of the Queens in Egypt is as big as the Valley of the Kings and is a lot more beautiful. Next question.
I am Dharana Lakhmani from Banaras Hindu University. So I am really sorry for my language, but the head of a brothel is known as a brothel keeper. And according to the definitions, it says it is a woman, a brothel keeper is a woman who runs the house of prostitution. So it is only a woman who drags many other young girls into brothel and exploits them and makes them not empowered. So how can we stop that? If any of the panelists could answer that.
Seema, do you want to respond to that? I mean, do you think that it is women that are responsible for dragging women into positions of submission?
I don't think that women can bring in anyone unless these women have either greed for money or they are in a condition where they can't look after themselves at all. So it is either their, the economic conditions of these women is they're in such a poor state that they can't even take care of their 2 meals a day. And then they're probably responsible for looking after a family of, 8, 10. So because of which they take up, and they're not educated, once again, I would say what the 2 ladies have been talking about. Yes, if they were educated and they could earn, by other means, I'm sure they would have done that. But here in this case, since they're not educated, they don't have a piece of land, they don't have money, they need money desperately and they need quick money. Probably that's the only way they can, and I don't think that lady as such, the head of the brothel, can bring in just about anyone. It's their need, and it's, of course, they're very, very vulnerable to these kind of,
Sure.
So when we say that men and women are equal, we mean that we are equally good and we are equally bad. There's no particular reason why a woman, just because somebody is a woman, she has to be, all innocent and divine and have all the virtuous qualities and not have any of the vices. There's no reason for that. We have some pretty bad women villains. And what you are saying, it's not just one brothel. We have in South Asia, across South Asia, we have a very large girl and woman trafficking racket going on. It's all over the world, but it's very bad in South Asia. And many of the traffickers are women. So just as men exploit women, women also exploit women. Women exploit children, they exploit men. So when that happens, we just have to, treat that woman as a criminal and do whatever is needed to do that. But remember, there are also women judges and women police officers.
Ali, your question.
Hello. My name is Ali Dasturdi from Harvard University. I actually don't have a question for our esteemed panelists. I think everything that they've said is incredibly powerful and astute. I would like to add one point to the discussion, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
So I am well educated. I certainly have never faced any degree of poverty, yet I am incredibly lazy. I have never thought about my own empowerment, yet I stand here, and I have since the beginning of my life, as an empowered individual. Because as a man, empowerment is presumptive in its nature. I cannot echo the strong call to action that these female panelists have presented to us, because the hypocrisy there would be palpable, to say the least. But I would like to simply make a statement that the patriarchy that we have spoken about is not some presumptive structure boogeyman that exists beyond the power of the people standing here today. It is propagated by the privilege that men hold. And I don't mean to co-opt a discussion about women's empowerment to speak about men. That too would be a power of patriarchy. But I do think it would be wrong for at least the men in this room to think that we have heard some strong women say that women should be empowered and to fight. But that fight doesn't need to be that hard, and to be presumptive on that would be false.
I think, Anuradha wants to respond.
It's not
to
false. It's not presumptive to be false on how hard that fight may be. From multi-layered and multicultural societies, we can't even comprehend what poverty brings to a woman. What years and years of suppression, generations of oppression. Twins, brother and sister, would not see the same life. So it's not presumptive. It would not be false. We would need to, the same mother would not give the same opportunities to her daughter which she would give to her son, born of the same womb at the same time. She would not. The father may. There have been instances where the father has been kinder than the woman herself, because she has seen that oppression. She believes it to be a way of life. And this comes with years of poverty. This comes with years of ignorance. Knowledge is what you know. So ignorance is also what you know. And if you know that women should do this, you have never challenged that notion, what are you going to teach the girl child? You're going to teach the girl child, this is the life I've seen, this is what you should know. Only the educated woman will know, no, this, what I knew was wrong. So that power has to come from outside, from knowledge, from suffering. But suffering also doesn't mean anything till you have the knowledge that you can overcome it. And you have just shown how empowered a man is. He does not need to know.
I think it's in the United States of America today, women's empowerment is a little delicate point of all days today, I mean. So we'll not discuss that issue further. But I think, one of the things that I always remember is we had a very famous professor of anatomy in medical college who would always say, when you feel angry at your mother and you want to get up and shout at her or scream at her, sometimes you're irritated at her because she's a woman, even though she's your mother, just bow your head down and look at your navel. And when you bow your head down and look at your navel, you'll remember that for 9 months, she nourished you through there so that you could set foot on this planet. So mother is the first woman that any man or woman sees, feels, and appreciates as a member of the same or opposite sex. And that is why I find it so paradoxical that we need to talk about empowerment of women, because your mother is the only friend who is absolutely conditionless that you encounter from the day of your birth, if not for 9 months before you're born. So I think as mothers, the mothers probably have the greatest role to bring about education of women's empowerment on this planet. Would you agree with that, Seema?
Absolutely. Mothers, when you talk about, of course, we're talking about this obstacle, and I must tell you something. Here we have 3 girls, and then we have a boy. And the boy is the apple of everybody's eye, and what happens is the girls are not treated, as Dr. Lohia just now mentioned, that there's a girl and a boy. I'm talking about 3 girls and a boy. So the boy is a God's gift on mankind, and the entire family dotes on him. The child misbehaves with all lady teachers in the school. And when the parents are invited, the parents defend the child. And then later on, when the mother, after talking to them for a while and telling them that, look, it's going to, later on in life, you'll suffer. Why don't you listen to this? So the mother says, yes, he misbehaves. And the father gets up to slap the mother in the presence of the son, in the presence of the office staff. And that is where we know why the boy has no idea as to how he has to behave with women, because he thinks his grandmother is treated the same way by his grandfather, and the mother is treated like this by the husband. So he thinks all women have to be treated like that. So this is the training that the children get from their families, and it's difficult to, remove those shackles. It's not easy. Yeah. It's just not easy.
So it is the family really from where our sense of our sexual identity, equal or unequal, comes, whether it's mother or father. I think both are responsible. Naman, you had a question.
Okay. I'd like to echo Ellie's point as well, that I don't mean to hijack the discussion, but I did want to ask a question of Dr. Lohia especially. I know you've talked a lot about the importance of education and how education can be used to empower women. But I guess part of my confusion, or maybe sort of where my question stems from, is some studies that have been conducted in the business world, especially, and the American corporate world. And so a recent study that was published by Harvard Business Review talked about sort of the most educated women, so those with MBAs or those with BBA degrees. And they discovered that almost 7% of the wage gap between female and male employees of corporations can be explained by the initial act of negotiation. And so what they found is that females often, on account of the way that society socializes women to not ask for more or to ask for their fair share, they found that almost 7% of the difference in the wage gap can be explained by that gender gap. And over the course of their working lifetime, they can be expected to learn almost $2 million less, which I think feeds into that discussion of economic inequality between the genders.
It is true. It's very rampant, especially in the corporate world. Even in the academia in America, we know that women are paid less than their male counterparts, having got the same degrees, the same experience. And even sometimes it has happened that they have better publications and still get a lower pay. I'm very glad to tell you that in Indian academia, this doesn't happen. Everyone gets the same pay. Gender is not an issue. And I speak from experience. What does happen is probably the same in the corporate world, though I can't speak from experience there, but I suspect that that happens. And this is something which a large number of women have been fighting. Some men have also been fighting about this, those who are sympathetic, and it's very unfortunate that this gender disparity in pay protection especially, even in promotion norms, it happens in America. And it is very disturbing that in the first country of the world, this is what's happening. Often, though, there is a problem that we see and which we have noted. Same number of students go to do a PhD, 50% of them are men and 50% are women. By the time they go for, and I speak in biology, by the time they go to do a postdoc, the number has fallen to 30% of the women and 70% are men. Faculty positions, it's an abysmal 10% women and 90% men. And when it comes to the top position of being the director or the head of an institution, it's almost always a man. Very, very few women make it. And I'm humbled that I have made it. I have gone through the glass ceiling. And I must tell you that there were male friends who wanted that I should be recognized over there.
You do not need women anymore to demand empowerment. They can command empowerment. And we're no longer in the age that they need to make a demand for it. It's their right. Unfortunately, this whole business is a paradox. And to our foreign guests, they will not know that in this city, we celebrate the festival of some puja, which is worship of a deity, every few weeks, if not days. And almost all the deities that are worshipped here, the so-called pujas we have, are all females. So much so that it is a little bit embarrassing, but there is only one male god that is worshipped, and his name is Vishwakarma. And when they take him out for immersion, they shout, Vishwakarma Mai Ki Jai, because they think everybody is a female that is worshipped here. But the paradox here still is that in this country, we have killed more unborn girls than the number of human beings that have been killed in 2 world wars. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the paradox of women's empowerment today. Seema Sapru, Anuradha and Shati, thank you very much. You've been a great panelist. Thank you very much. We'll end this discussion.